Of the show today, and joining us now in the studio, Jameson Taylor, the president of the Center for Political Renewal. Thanks for joining us today, Jameson. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show, Gerard.
You bet. So, what about 2021? It was a fascinating year, to say the least. There were some things that we hoped to get done, didn't. Some things we did get done on the policy front. And now we've got 2022 in the windshield as we head in that direction. So your summary, I guess, of 2021, what you liked and what you thought we missed out on.
Well, I think I might be becoming more cynical, so I'm trying to work against that with the new year coming.
Yeah.
And so as I thought about 2021, the first thing that I was tempted to say was that it was a wasted opportunity, in particular for Republicans. And as I thought about that some more, I decided that would not be fair. I think that as we look back at 2021, we had a major hangover from the 2020 presidential election as well as from COVID, and we're still kind of suffering from both of those in a certain respect, but especially COVID. And so I think it was a year to press the reset button for Mississippi lawmakers and to kind of wait and see what is Washington going to do, what's going to happen with COVID. And so I can kind of give them a little bit of a pass for 2021. Now, that doesn't mean that nothing happened in the legislative session. We did see the Mississippi legislature, basically, they did two things that I'll give them credit for, and then they did not do two things that we should discuss. So the first thing they did, they passed the Fairness Act, which is to protect women's sports from transgender males. And I still don't really know the right word. I mean, I have a PhD, but I still can't keep all this straight. I don't know, literally, is a transgender male a male who's a female or a female who's a male? Anyway, so the legislature became the second state in the country to protect women's sports from that trend. And hats off to the governor for signing that legislation in spite of an immense amount of pressure. Now, the second thing the legislature did was they passed an innovative occupational licensing reform, and that's not a driver's license reform. When I talk about occupational licensing, that means basically a license that you need to work, for instance, to be an electrician or a plumber or what have you. We basically made it easier for folks that have a license in another state to move to Mississippi and start to work as soon as possible. We were about the 10th state in the country to do that. That's a great reform. Any reforms that Mississippi passes to get people back to work are good because we have the second lowest labor force participation rate in the country.
Right.
Now, two things that they did not do, which we're all aware of. They did not pass a tax cut bill. They did not eliminate the income tax. They had a lot of conversations toward that end. And, last time they did this, they passed the largest tax cut in state history. This was when Philip Gunn was Speaker and Tate Reeves was the Lieutenant Governor. I think it was that 2016 or 18 or so?
Yeah.
It took 2 years to do that, so that's fine. We had a lot of conversation about it in 2021. I think looking to 2022, it's time for something to happen. Now, the other thing that they did not do that we're also all aware of is they did not pass a marijuana legalization bill. Now, that's a strange thing to kind of watch because as I was watching that unfold, I saw that there was a lot of energy behind that bill, especially in the Senate. And this was before the state Supreme Court had struck down the initiative process. Mm-hmm. And, that little cynical part of me kind of wondered, why is there so much energy behind this? Is there an expectation that the court is going to strike that down? Well, lo and behold, that happened. And so obviously that's going to be on the agenda going into 2022. But I think the bigger picture is this. Going into 2022, the Republicans don't have any excuses. This has to be a big year for them. And I'm no longer with the Mississippi Center for Public Policy, so I'm taking off my nonpartisan hat, and I'm going to use words like Republican and Democrat when I'm on the show today, which I typically don't use. But I think looking kind of just in an objective way as to the Republicans have power, they have supermajorities, at least in the House, and voters are expecting them to do something. So I think that 2022 has to be a big year for Republicans in Mississippi. No excuses. Now, at the same time, what I see is that the Democrats are setting the agenda. And the Republicans are complaining about that, and they maybe might do something to push back against that. But I'm seeing that the Democrats it looks to me like they have the keys to the car and that they are driving the agenda. And if I can talk about basically 5 ways in which that they're doing that. If you want me to delve into that.
Well, yeah. Give an example of how you think the Democrats are setting the agenda there. That's interesting.
Yeah. So first one out of 5. Passing any kind of initiative process. If we look at the initiative process and you look at this nationwide, most of the states east of the Mississippi don't have an initiative process at all.
Yeah.
Now, why is that? It's because they're older states. They're more informed by the principles of a constitutional republic. The initiative process is a progressive, liberal idea. There are only 2 southern states that have an initiative process. Florida and Arkansas. And those states have moved to tighten up that process quite a bit, for instance, requiring things like a supermajority, not allowing things like pay per signature, which leads to a lot of abuses. They've tightened up that initiative process because they recognize that this is a very problematic idea. One, it's the left is using it to go around Republican legislatures all around the country. And what are they doing? They're putting out ideas like ranked choice voting, which is a horrible idea. What happens with ranked choice voting is this: you might vote for Donald Trump for president, number 1. You might vote for Biden, number 2, and then Bernie Sanders, number 3. Just as a whim, because hey, I like Bernie, he's a nice guy, so I'll give him the 3 vote. Well, what happens with ranked choice voting is somehow that number 3 guy ends up winning. And the left, especially the far left, the hard left, benefits from this type of reform. These are the types of things that you're going to see on your ballot initiative process. You're seeing this around the country. Also, things like Medicaid expansion, also things like felon voting, just a variety of things that are aimed at going around the legislature. Mississippi passed their own initiative process in 1992. It's not like it's hundreds of years old. It's fairly recent, and it was passed by a Democrat legislature. It's a bad idea. Republicans shouldn't bring back the initiative process. They should thank the state Supreme Court for striking it down and let things lie. The second thing, Medicaid expansion. Why are we even having a conversation about Medicaid expansion when we have the Republican trifecta here in Mississippi? And in fact, any kind of welfare expansion. We saw last year, for instance, that Republicans moved to increase cash welfare. Now, people are going to say, Jamison, why do you hate welfare? It's not that I hate welfare. I think welfare should be channeled and targeted to help people that are the most vulnerable, to help the elderly, to help mothers that are struggling to care for their children. But what welfare is right now is it's so large, it's being extended to able-bodied working-age adults.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it destroys families. It encourages, for instance, young men in particular not to work. Welfare policy, when it's done like that, is an anti-family policy and an anti-prosperity policy. When we talk about reforming welfare, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. For instance, unemployment fraud. The legislature should be looking at unemployment fraud. And what does that mean? It means getting dead people off of unemployment. We have billions and billions of dollars of unemployment fraud all around the country. It's already been uncovered. These
$300 billion nationwide.
These Nigerian rings that are stealing unemployment benefits.
Yep.
The legislature could do some really simple things to reform that. They could require more frequent checking so that people don't end up on your unemployment rolls month after month after month. This is something that Louisiana recently did. When I talk about checking, what I'm talking about is this person alive? Does this person live in our state? Really easy things to check.
Yep.
We need to do that more frequently and reform our unemployment system. Another thing, marijuana legalization. Now, wherever you stand,
medical marijuana.
I'm just going to talk about marijuana.
Go ahead.
Wherever you stand on marijuana, it's not a conservative issue. Now, granted, it's a libertarian issue, it's a Democrat issue, whatever, but when I look at all the bad blood that's been spilt over the last couple of years on the marijuana issue, It's essentially a priority for Republicans right now in our state. I think that's sad. I think it is a wasted opportunity. Whether we legalize marijuana or not, I think that all the energy that's gone behind that is misplaced. And I think that Republican voters in particular are expecting more from the folks that they elected.
It's no doubt it's a very contentious issue that to a great extent has divided the party itself. I totally agree with you. All right, we got a break right here. You can hang around.
I can.
We got a little bit more to talk about on 21, and then we'll get to 22 and get your thoughts on that. We got Dr. Jameson Taylor, president of the Center for Political Renewal, in the studio. We'll be right back. In the studios, Dr. Jameson Taylor, the president of the Center for Political Renewal. So you were talking in the last segment, Jameson, about how the Democrats, you feel, are to a great extent driving the agenda at the Capitol. Even though we have a supermajority in the House, we don't have one in the Senate. We're close to one, right?
Yeah, close to one, yeah.
Yeah, and of course we have the governor's mansions as well. So the lawmaking facilities of government, if you will, are controlled by the Republican Party. But it seems odd that the other party is driving the narrative and driving the agenda. One thing that intrigued me is you seem to express your opposition. And don't want to speak for you, but if I heard this right, your opposition to a mechanism that would allow citizens to properly post a ballot measure on a ballot so the citizens can vote for it, that would amend our Constitution, which is, of course, we can't do anything now because the Supreme Court says we got an inconsistency there. That was the cause for striking down the medical marijuana ballot measure. So tell us your thoughts on that, why you oppose the citizens having available to them the opportunity to gather signatures, get a measure on the ballot, let the citizens vote on it, and in this case amend the Constitution, or perhaps even some support amending or establishing statute.
Yeah, and I'll preface my remarks by saying that you'd be hard-pressed to find a bigger advocate for transparency here in Mississippi than myself, and I've worked on quite a few transparency bills over the years. You'd be hard-pressed to find a better advocate who wants fair voting and wants to have people have access and wants them to have robust participation in the democratic process. And those are the reasons why I oppose the initiative process. It does not lend itself to transparency. Instead, what it lends itself to is big money donors, in particular out-of-state donors like a Bloomberg, coming in and foisting their agenda on other states, in particular smaller states like Mississippi. We have seen this over and over again around the country. The other problem with the initiative process is that it is very difficult to do correctly. It's very difficult to make sure that, for instance, a ballot initiative is supported by people all around the state, as opposed to, for instance, maybe just your major urban areas where some out-of-state donor has put a lot of money into that urban area. And we haven't even talked about, for instance, the election reforms that Mississippi needs to pass, and that should be a priority for Republicans in 2022. But one of those donors is Mark Zuckerberg, who put $400 million into elections all around the country. But there are a number of problems that come up in trying to do the initiative process right. And I say the legislature should press the pause button, and they shouldn't reinstitute this. They certainly should not be in any hurry to do this. And in fact, there's precedent for this. Mississippi had an initiative process, I think, in place in 1912. And our state Supreme Court, if my memory serves me correctly, struck it down. And so for 70 years, we didn't have, maybe 70, 80 years or so, until 1992, we didn't, maybe it was 1922, the court struck it down. For 70 years, we didn't have an initiative process. Yeah. Now, we got it back in 1992. Is a bad idea. Before 1992, it's a bad idea now. We got it back. Here's the thing. If voters really want something, elect the lawmakers that you want to represent you. Go to the Capitol, lobby for what you want, and get it done. That's how legislation gets passed. I've been struck by how accessible the Mississippi Capitol is, how accessible and how open our lawmakers are. even folks that disagree with you.
I would agree with you
They're
on
willing
that.
to sit down, have a conversation in the hallway, grab a cup of coffee. We have direct democracy already. It entails going to the Capitol, talking to your lawmaker, or better yet, in your community, most lawmakers are happy to sit down with constituents and talk to them about their concerns.
Yeah.
So we have an incredible amount of openness already. I think the initiative process does not lend itself to that kind of openness, and instead it lends itself to being hijacked by the left.
Yeah. Interesting perspective. We've got comments on the C Spire text line. It seems like most people dissent with your view on that. You're probably not surprised about that.
No, I'm not. And, I haven't even gotten to agenda item 4 and 5 of the 5 ways that I think Democrats are poised to hijack the 2022 session. By the time I get through 4 and 5, I think you'll have even more text on the line. So,
okay.
Number 4, teacher pay raise. Why are Republicans falling over themselves to give teachers another pay raise? We've had 3 pay raises since 2014. I bet a lot of workers here in Mississippi who work in the private sector have not had similar pay raises. I mean, isn't there something else that we could do to improve education here in Mississippi as opposed to doing the same old thing that's been tried over and over again, which we know does not lead to better outcomes in the classroom? Try something new, okay? That's number 4. And number 5, this is going to surprise people. Critical race theory. I think it's dumb that Republican lawmakers are pushing a ban on critical race theory. Now, I oppose critical race theory. I oppose it because I think it's a core tenet of essentially communism, socialism. Critical race theory is based upon a lie. It's prejudicial and discriminatory, but I don't think that we can really ban it in the classroom. It's like saying we're going to ban the color yellow in the classroom. Okay, well, people aren't going to use the word yellow in the classroom anymore, but they're still going to have that same content. And I think by banning critical race theory, you're really kind of doing nothing, making people feel better. And in that way, it also is falling into the Democrats' agenda because they can complain about it and rail against it, knowing that at the end of the day, banning critical race theory will have done nothing to stop their agenda in classrooms in America's public educational system. So if I'm a Democrat going into 2022, I am feeling pretty good because Republicans are doing my work for me. Now, if we have time, I can give you 5 things that I think the Republicans should do instead.
Okay, go.
So,
you got about 4 minutes.
Yeah, 4 minutes. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying this. I think Republicans have lost their base. And I'm going to kind of condense this to say the prettiest girl in school is going to the prom with the Republicans, and they think that they're her man of her dreams. It's not true. She just doesn't have anything better to do. Republican voters, in particular, their base, they're tired, they're ambivalent, and they're skeptical, and Republicans need to do something to recapture their base in particular. So I'm going to go through this real quick since I have 3 minutes left by now. Number 1, I mentioned this briefly, but reform the voting process. One reason Republicans are tired and ambivalent and skeptical is because they don't trust the vote anymore. They don't think that their vote counts, that their vote matters. We need to do some things to reform the voting process here in Mississippi, things like what other states have done, like Georgia and Texas. Number 2, let's get people back to work. Here's something that most people don't know. When Republicans get on welfare, they vote Democrat. So if you want to keep kind of creating the base for your opposition, keep allowing people to stay on welfare. The best thing that we can do is additional reforms to our welfare system to encourage people to get back to work. Number 3, in addition to encouraging people to get back to work, give students the skills that they need to get a good job. For instance, you have other states that are using their dual credit programs in particular to get high school kids excited about work opportunities. There's a program that lawmakers are looking at for 2022 called the Accelerate Mississippi Scholarship Program. That's something that's going to increase high school graduation rates, but also college enrollment rates and career tech. That's something concrete that lawmakers can do now. Now, number 4, I talked about the income tax. I don't know if we're going to eliminate the income tax, but I will say Republicans need to deliver the largest tax cut in state history. They did it before. Do it again. Cut a little bit more, give us the largest tax cut in state history, cut taxes. And then number 5 is pretty simple. Tell the truth. The problem we have, one reason that a lot of voters are skeptical, and we were talking about it, related to COVID. Voters are skeptical because they don't trust the information that they're getting, and they don't believe that the folks that they have elected are standing up to the liars and bullies that are running our bureaucracies here in the United States. You've seen Mississippi stand up for things like pro-life and religious liberty, things that I'm a huge fan of. Those are essentially truth-telling exercises. It's saying, the truth that the baby in the womb is a life worth protecting, the truth that people disagree over same-sex marriage, but let's still respect their liberty. Mississippi lawmakers need to tell the truth and push back against bullies. Tell the truth about the COVID mess. Tell the truth about mandates. Tell the truth about Build Back Better. Why aren't Republicans doing more to fight Build Back Better, which is going to turn our country into, hardcore socialism?
Agree.
So
I'm with you.
That's my advice.
Well,
Those
we try to do that on this program, and we rail against the politicians who do not tell the truth, as we talked about today. We were talking about the passing of Harry Reid, who blatantly lied, knowingly lied about Mitt Romney not paying any taxes, and then after Barack Obama was elected, say, well, it worked, didn't it? I mean, he's no remorse for it.
Keep telling the truth, Gerard.
We'll
we need it.
Good to see you again, my friend, Dr. Jameson Taylor, the president of the Center for Political Renewal, has been our guest. We'll take a break. We got half an hour of middays left. Stay with us.